Assalamualaikum and good evening to all our followers and good afternoon if you're following us from Italy. Welcome to Sembang aka Siri 18, which is the 18th series of our sharing. Uh, the topic for today is tenancy during COVID-19 in Malaysia and Italy. My name is Nick Rosley. I'm a partner in Ami Kushari and Associates. I will be your moderator for today. We are pleased and privileged to have two very special guests, very knowledgeable and intellectual guests of mine. First is Francesca Sperti from Bologna, Italy. Hi, Francesca.
Hi.
Hi, Francesca.
Hi, nice to see you.
Izyan Shazwani from Setia Alam, Malaysia.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so the topic today is tenancy during COVID-19 in Malaysia and Italy. So around the world, we were faced with COVID-19 and a lot of movement restrictions. In Malaysia, the movement control order started in 18th March and is still continuing, but under conditional MCO. So the retail group Malaysia, RGM, estimates 209,000 stores were closed during MCO, at least that is in Malaysia, and a lot of losses in retail overheads, including overheads of rental. Personally, my landlord gave a discount, but unfortunately, a lot of tenants were faced with full rental payments, even though they could not operate, and a lot of other issues which will be shared by our speakers today. Right. First of all, we would like to inform our listeners we are all BNI members, Business Network International, and myself and Francesca are members of Worldwide Independent Lawyers League, WIL, which was officially rebranded yesterday. So this is the first sharing with a partner from Italy. So I will start with Izyan. Could you just introduce briefly what you do and your areas of practice to us?
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum. Hi, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nick, for this amazing opportunity. I am Izyan Aziz, a property lawyer from Malaysia, having experience of more than 13 years in relation to property legal matters, such as preparing documentation and handling procedures for sale and purchase agreements, tenancy and lease agreement, loan agreement, land development, and any dealings related to land offices in Peninsular Malaysia. Back to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you, Izyan. She she is modest, not to mention that she was nominated as the Young Lawyer of the Year in 2019 by Asian Legal Business. So
Thank
that's an
you.
achievement. That doesn't make her that young, but she was nominated as the Young Lawyer of the Year last year. Okay, I think Francesca is laggy. Okay, we'll wait for her to. Okay, yes. Francesca, you're back. You disappeared for a while. Okay, I think she's still lagging. Francesca, can you hear us? Okay. We will get back to her once her line is back. Maybe we can start with Izyan. Can you just give a general introduction to property law in Malaysia? Bear in mind that we may have listeners who are not in Malaysia, but I guess there are some listeners that do not really understand Malaysian property law. So could you just share with us generally?
All right. Before that, I would like to ask permission from you that I would explain general property law in Malaysia and also specific in tenancy law in Malaysia. Can I have that? Nick?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I got cut off as well. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yes. Continue then.
In Malaysia, foreign system is the basis of the property legal administration on which all dealings in land are subject to registration in order to be effective and to establish the ownership of an indivisible interest of a person to a property. All dealings on the property must be in the prescribed form and duly registered with the relevant land registry in order to confer title or interest on the new proprietor or interest holder. Apart from the National Land Code, there are other acts and rules which could supersede the National Land Code. But this topic is another topic and a huge topic that perhaps Nick can invite me once again to do this sharing session. Just kidding.
Yes.
So that is the general property in law in Malaysia. While specific tenancy law in Malaysia, which relates to our topic tonight, is like this. Tenancy in Malaysia, unlike other jurisdictions such as the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, Malaysia does not have a distinct legislation that deals specifically with landlords and tenants. But we used to have an act pertaining to rental. The earliest law on landlord and tenant or matters related to rent in Peninsular Malaysia is Rent Control Act 1966. It is an act inherited from England by which the rentals of all buildings that were built prior to the Second World War were controlled. This was to protect a tenant from being evicted. Nevertheless, the act was repealed and abolished in 2000, around 2000, I think. As it currently stands, tenancy in Malaysia are mainly governed by the law of contracts and common law. And in legislation such as the National Land Code 1965, Civil Law Act, Distress Act, and Specific Relief Act. But these legislations deal with specific issues on tenancies, not only as a whole. For example, Contract Act is the legislation which would cover conflicts on the tenancy agreement. Civil Law Act is the legislation which would cover payments dispute. Distress Act is the legislation covering matters of eviction, or in other words, sending the court bailiff to seize all or sell the tenant's good in satisfaction of the areas. And Specific Relief Act specifically requires a landlord to obtain a court order before he can recover possession of the property from a tenant. So it's quite a lot legislation to refer to. Before I go into details, I would like to highlight that in Malaysia, we have two kinds pertaining to tonight's topic. There are lease and tenancy. Okay, we put tenancy aside for a while and talk about lease. Lease is a registered lease or sublease of land by the lessor, the owner of the land, to the lessee for a term exceed 3 years, while tenancy denotes a letting of land for a term not exceed 3 years and is not a registrable interest. Okay, lease registered, tenancy is not registrable, meaning it is not a requirement to register the tenancy. It is also known as a tenancy exempt from registration, in which the law exempts the tenancy from being registered, but it may be endorsed on the title. Okay, now there are two further types of tenancy, namely tenancy in public or private sector. Tenancy in public sector refers to a tenancy scheme offered by government agencies. There is a standard form of tenancy agreement of public residential tenancy with a very minimal rental fee. All the terms and conditions of the tenancy agreement in this sector are predetermined. This public residential tenancy is only available to certain qualified people who fulfill certain criteria set out by the state government agencies. While private residential tenancy is any tenancy that is created between an individual, landlord, and a tenant. So, the governing document of a tenancy is the tenancy agreement, which contains the terms agreed on both parties. It is based on the freedom of contract to form a contractual relationship between them.
I see. So, in summary, the terms of the law governing tenancy is all over the place.
Yep.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes. So at the moment, if there is a dispute or an issue regarding tenancy, you need to look at a lot of acts, which is a bit
Scattered.
something should be done. Yes, scattered. Okay, thank you, Izyan. Do we have Francesca? Are you back with us? Can't hear us. Yes, the internet is not kind to us today. Okay. Okay, looks like okay, the internet is still not stable for Francesca. We shall wait for a few seconds. Can you hear us? No. Okay. Well then, maybe Izyan, this is your
Yes.
opportunity to continue talking.
I need a wait.
Okay. So, can you highlight to us what are the common issues faced by tenants, especially during our movement control order?
Okay. Before I touch the issues relating to the pandemic COVID-19, I would like to mention that early this year, it was reported that the Ministry of Housing and Local Government of Malaysia was in the midst of drafting a proposed Residential Tenancy Act. The proposed act is expected to be presented to the Malaysian Parliament this year. But now we are having this pandemic, so we are not sure on when the proposed act shall table at the parliament. So actually, I would like to share on the proposed act a bit, but I know that I will consume so much time here. Again, maybe Mr. Nick can invite me to do the sharing for his next episode. So back to the question on the legal issues arising during COVID-19. I think we lost Nick somehow.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, all right. So I just continue.
Okay, I'm just hiding myself.
All right. No doubt that the movement control order implemented throughout Malaysia since 18 March this year, as mentioned by Nick, triggers a serious financial impact from dropping the revenue for businesses to individuals suffering from loss of income and even loss of jobs. This is expected to continue even after MCO. Consequently, business owners and individual tenants may not be able to meet their rental obligation. But does this mean that the MCO triggers an automatic right to suspend or reduce rental payment? The answer is it is all about what does the tenancy agreement says. First of all, the MCO is not an automatic ground to defer paying or reduce rent, except if a tenant is renting a premise announced in the government's Prihatin initiative. Anyway, Francesca, for your information, Prihatin means concern in English. I'll be mentioning some Malay words, but I will translate for you and for Italian audience. Non preoccuparte. All right. Therefore, it is necessary to look to the tenancy agreement for clauses where rent or obligation of the rent may be suspended or reduced due to pandemic or government orders. This is commonly known as the force majeure clause, which is everyone here?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I
because
think
I
Francesca,
only see
Fran-
myself.
yes, I'm giving you the spotlight.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, can I continue? Okay, this is
Yes.
commonly known as force majeure clause, which sets out events and circumstances that are beyond the control of the parties and make it impossible to perform their obligation in the agreement. Examples of events includes natural disasters, act of God, fires, war, or strikes. Second, the force majeure clause is not automatic basis. It must be expressly included in the agreement by the parties. And the wording of the clause has to be examined to determine if it is wide enough to conclude the MCO or the COVID-19 outbreak. So, what do I do? I am a tenant. I cannot go out to work at my office. Should I still paying rent for my office? I cannot earn money during this MCO. Can I stop pay the rental of my house? The answer is most likely you still have to pay because usually the only clause in the tenancy agreement where rent is suspended because tenant is unable to use or occupy is usually because the property is damaged or destructed. For tenants who can still use their premises, it must be understood that the inability to pay rent because of the MCO is primarily due to financial difficulties, and tenants' obligation to pay rent under tenancy agreement is usually not subject to their financial ability. It's like this. The agreement is you want to rent the premise. So we get into agreement, sign, and promise to pay the rent monthly. Okay, the Malaysian Federal Court, in the case of Pacific Forest, clarified that a contract which includes tenancy agreement does not, in law, become frustrated merely because it becomes difficult to perform. Even if a party has no money to pay his debt rent, it cannot be considered a valid justification to breach the tenancy agreement. Again, the scope and wordings of the force majeure event set out in such clause is relevant to determine whether it is sufficient to include the MCO or COVID-19 outbreak. So in conclusion, tenants seeking to rely on the MCO or the COVID-19 outbreak to defer or reduce rent must first find out whether their tenancy agreement contains a force majeure clause. And if yes, whether that clause is wide enough to cover MCO or the COVID-19 outbreak. In the absence of any force majeure or similar clause in the tenancy agreement, tenants cannot delay or defer or reduce rental payment or even terminate the tenancy due to the MCO or COVID-19 because it is their duty to pay rent as agreed anyway. So failure or delay by the tenant to pay rent for any reasons not specified in the tenancy agreement constitutes a default or breach and would entitle the landlord to take actions against the tenant as set out in the agreement or conferred by the law, such as to proceed with distress action or to recover areas of rent and even terminating the tenancy and get the premise back.
I see. So currently the law depends very much on the wordings of the agreement, and I'm sure you can agree with me, Izyan, that most tenancy agreements are template agreements taken from wherever they get it. So
Copy and
I'm
paste.
sure copy and paste, and I'm sure a lot of them didn't consider or include force majeure. So I think that's where some difficulty arises because it was not, I guess, properly drafted. A lot of tenants and landlords take tenancy agreements very lightly.
Mm.
They just copy and paste. Sometimes no property agents do the tenancy agreements and not lawyers. So
Mm.
the value of lawyers are actually now when there's a problem and everybody is
Yeah.
facing that.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I would like to welcome our good friend Marco Buscema, who is a member of our a partner of our Worldwide Independent Lawyers League from Italy. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're having problems with Francesca. Let's see whether we have her back. We The problem with technology is we tested for a good 10 minutes before we started, and we could hear and see Francesca very, very well. Unfortunately, the moment we started going live, she has disappeared. So unfortunately, we still do not have her. So yes, Izyan, you
Yeah.
will have to you will have to continue talking. Okay. So um, probably I will just share um, one of my clients. They are renting in KLCC. For those not
Mm-hmm.
familiar, it's where the twin towers are, and the
Mm.
rental is 8,000.
Mm.
So the management only allowed 50% discount, which still
Mm.
amounted to 40,000 rental, which they had to pay when they could not operate or open. So that is a large amount, and
Yeah.
their clients are struggling. I guess everybody is struggling. So it's a the law, of course. I think Izan has explained the law on frustration and force majeure, but it's unfortunate that they still have to pay. So I guess what would you advise tenants who are struggling? How can the law help? Because I mean we are quite clear of the legal position. They still have to pay. That is the legal position. I think unless they have the force majeure clause, they still have to pay. So that is the legal position. But as a lawyer, how can you advise tenants who are struggling with you know rental payments or having problems with their landlord?
Okay. Remember that I mentioned about the Malaysian government initiative, right? So, um, since Malaysian government has announced the initiative taken to provide relief to affected individuals and businesses, if I'm not mistaken, there are, for example, 6 months rental exemption. This is for Project Perumahan Rakyat. People's housing project, and the other one is Perumahan Awam, if I'm not mistaken. And there is another rental exemption premise owned by the federal government, uh, something like school canteen, nurseries, cafeteria, and also waiver or discount for rental for SME. But if you are not within this government initiative, and if there are no force majeure clause in your tenancy agreement, first, by continuing to pay the rent would be the best thing to do. Second, discuss with your landlord, and if there is any agreement has been reached, please put it in writing. That is why you really need a good lawyer to represent you on this matter. COVID-19 and the impact on the economy is guaranteed to affect many individuals and businesses in many ways, including our tenants agreements. The best way is for parties to understand each other and compromise wherever possible. The time, effort, and cost for parties to litigate often incur more cost. if rent can be discounted or deferred, it is certainly worth of consideration. This would help especially good tenants who are facing genuine financial difficulties to remain in the premises and continue with their tenancy. Contract are, after all, agreements between the parties, and they can always agree among themselves on matters not provided or addressed in the agreement. A waiver or reduction of rent not only benefit the tenants but may help landlords to avoid the risk of the premise being left unoccupied if the tenant vacate the premises or close their business. To get new tenants during this kind of economic downturn may be very, very hard. Landlord and tenants should work together rather than insisting on strict compliance and enforcement of rent payment on tenants, especially who are genuinely affected. What is more crucial now is to ensure business continuity and ability to resume business and in turn retain employment and protect jobs. We must all play our part in. Last but not least, by appointing a property lawyer, a good property lawyer would really, really help you from the first step into the world of the tenancy. Tenancy agreement is not a copy paste like most people think or even do just to avoid cost. And by looking at what is happening now, it is very difficult, right? To think, to react on how to solve these legal issues where you are not the expert at all. Please contact your lawyer for further advice. Or if you don't have one, find one. Back to you, Nick.
Yes, thank you for that. I think you've mentioned something quite pertinent that even for a landlord, I have a client who is also a landlord. What happened to them is their tenant just left the premise during MCO. So that is a possibility as well. So from a tenant point of view, you have trouble paying, but from landlord point of view, you also need to consider some compromise because
Yeah.
the risk of your tenant just going away will always be there if you become too harsh or too strict. So I think it's something that you need to discuss between each other. And the role of a property lawyer like Izyan is to ensure that everything is discussed professionally and everything that is agreed is put into writing to avoid further disputes later on in the future. So very, very good points, and I think something for our listeners to take home. Unfortunately, Francesca is having problems with the connection. One of those things that happens when you go live, but doesn't happen when we are not live. So I think if we can't get her back, probably what advice would you have, if any, if there's any more advice that you can give to our listeners, both whether they are tenant or landlord, on how to move forward with COVID-19. We are still in CMCO, which means that businesses may not be earning as much as they used to. So there will still be some cash flow problems. What do you suggest for a tenant, and what do you suggest for a landlord?
During this MCO, COVID-19, is it? Or landlord and tenant?
Yes.
For landlord, as we know, for landlords who enjoy the loan by the bank or any financial institution, you are currently enjoying the moratorium for 6 months. Okay, and some of the landlords, they enforce upon their tenants to continue paying in full. So some people question that whether it is right. You are enjoying your moratorium, but at the same time, you are asking money from the affected people. So, but you have to know that this moratorium is not for 6 months free. The time is extended, so meaning the landlord have to pay that 6 month later on. You have to take into consideration of that too. So that's my opinion is that maybe discounted the price is the best way to practice here, so that the landlord still can pay for the moratorium after the time extended, and the tenant still have to pay part of it, meaning that they save the half portion and another portion they should pay to the landlord for the survivability of both parties.
Okay, I think that's very good advice. I'm fortunate enough that my landlord is doing that, which means, uh, like Izyan mentioned, I think what is being the point missed by most people is the moratorium is not a discount or waiver. It's just the period extended, as well as interest must still be paid. So at the very least, I think landlords should compromise. Not full payment, but at least cover the interest, or at least half payment or some sort of payment. And for the tenant, you should also understand that for landlords, they still have to service the interest with the banks. So a compromise must be reached, but it must be a compromise. Both parties cannot be very, hard and strict on that issue.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Izan. I think we still can't get Francesca, which means I will have to have another session with her after later. So, okay. Is there anything else you would like to add on this topic? Probably, anything or final words?
Um, I'm really looking forward for the new proposed act. Because yeah, we for this tenancy which is not registered, not lease. Okay, lease is the rental which is more than 3 years. So now we are talking about rental which is less than 3 years. So we are really looking forward for the new proposed act, because we would like to see how far the this new act can control most of the issues happening in the world of the tenancy, because for example, like deposit that you have to pay during the signing of the tenancy agreement, there's stated nowhere in the act how much you should pay. Like for instance, and the obligation, everything. With that uh, new act, I hope we can improve our tenancy law in Malaysia, because we already have the lease registrable interest. That one you can register in the at the land office, and then the interest of the lessee is protected. How about for the tenant?
Okay, that's a good point. So, if there are any Wakil Rakyat MPs listening, that is Izyan is waiting for the act to be passed. I think all of us are waiting for the act to be passed. There's a lot of tendencies going around, and a lot of these little things that go beyond. Uh, the law can't really help if there's no proper tenancy act.
Yeah,
Okay,
can
thank
I
you
add
very.
some points?
Yes, sure.
Sorry. And
Hello.
because whenever you want to claim something from your tenancy agreement, you have to definitely go to court to claim. It's not automatic. You cannot ask for whatever in the agreement automatically. you have to spend money, you have to spend time to get your rights as stated in the agreement. What if the things are not stated in the agreement? It will prolong your process.
Yes. Okay. So make sure you put everything in writing and get a property lawyer to do it. Don't rely on Google or copy paste or whatever the property agent gives you. Make sure you are advised properly to avoid problems because COVID-19. I think not a lot of people saw it coming, but it came. It caught everybody by surprise. But those who had proper agreements managed could manage it properly. But those without are having a lot of problems now. So we are not having Francesca at the moment. So it looks like today's topic is tenancy during COVID-19 in Malaysia only. I'm sure I'll try and get back Francesca because she is really excited to be with us because
Yeah.
we had a conversation just before
Hmm.
we went live. Everything was okay. She was excited.
I
Then
want
the
to know the
moment we start,
Italian law about rental.
yes, I am interested to know Italian law on rental because as she had informed us briefly, there is a specific law in Italy regarding tenancy and tenancy, even short-term tenants like students, Airbnb, they have specific laws for that. So I was really interested to listen and to find out more about other jurisdictions. So
Hmm.
it's unfortunate that the connection is not good, but I'm sure and I hope that Francesca will be with us for our next sharing. And probably I will invite you, Izyan, as well to be with us, at least to
Observer.
listen more to what Francesca says, and give some feedback, at least from a Malaysian point of view. Okay, so thank you very much to all our listeners and our viewers. Once again, apologies because Francesca is having some problems, so we are not able to hear from the Italian point of view. However, we will try to get her back in another session. So stay tuned. If please do follow us on our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will update you on the next session when it comes to tenancy law in Italy. So thank you very much. Thank you, Zan, for your time. Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for listening. Assalamualaikum and good night.
Waalaikumsalam. Bye.
Bye.